We're on week 4 of creating a comic from scratch in 6 months, and today we're going to be talking about world building and iterative design. I think that doing concept art for something like comics is sometimes overlooked rather than doing it for video games, etc. Concept art is all about constraints and how you can use those to tell something about your world. Let's dive straight into what I'm doing today for Infinite and Momentary. First is the Eye of Ra drone, which is a surveillance drone, effectively. That's meant to have kind of like a Big Brother type vibe to it, like you're always being watched. The setting of Infinite and Momentary is in like a futuristic world that has some ancient Egypt in it. So the first thing I did was create a mood board. Mood boards are super helpful because they can help you kind of narrow down what you want to be inspired by, and it doesn't have to be very specific to what you're designing. Helmets can be inspired by like ants, for example, and how their carapaces and all that sort of stuff. The point of iterative design is that you want to create designs quickly and efficiently. So something that I find personally for myself, and I think probably for a lot of people, is that your first design or the first idea that you get out might not necessarily be your most inspired idea, and it probably isn't, if we're being honest with ourselves. So the idea is to quickly, not being focused on how accurate the drawing is or how beautiful it is, for example, is to quickly create a bunch of different iterations and work upon the ones that you like and take elements from your inspiration and all that sort of stuff, get to a design that you are happy with. And so that's what I'm doing here. One of the things that I had started with was basically just like a floating eye was kind of the concept. I was thinking very much like the Millennium Pieces from Yu-Gi-Oh!, which also has a lot of ancient Egypt symbology in it, obviously. And so that's where I started, and then I brought in inspirations from, like the scarab beetles, from even like crystal balls and how they're held. And then I also wanted to think about how this would logically work. So initially, while I was imagining a floating orb, that's like relatively easy. But when I started adding in some of these more like intense pieces, what I thought would be cool would be like if the ball itself, that's the eye or like the lens of the camera, could roll freely in kind of like some sort of like contained thing that was the part that flew. One of the other things I wanted to make sure was that it felt kind of creepy and like oppressive, and it's hard to do that necessarily with just like a floating ball, although like it definitely works, and with just a black and white drawing, because the other elements that I will bring in that will help influence like the ancient Egypt kind of vibe and the kind of like weird opulence that Pantheon has is like the gold accents and all that sort of stuff. And so this was just me quickly going through a bunch of different designs. And then I chose one that I liked the most and then created iterations on that to see which one I would go ahead with. And then next I wanted to design some fun robot friends. So I started this one a little bit differently. I started with some silhouettes, and for this one I used inspiration from a bunch of different things. One of the things that I did use inspiration from was like the robots from The Matrix, which I've always found terrifying, and the way that they're kind of like squid-like. And then I used a lot of animal references because I just wanted to see what it would be like if I kind of like went from a base of predatory animals. So I think I used bear in one, and I used a tiger for another one, because I kind of wanted to create like a sleek kind of scary looking robot. I don't think I ended up liking any of the animal ones, but what I did like was a lot of these kind of weird humanoid type ones that I took inspiration from some of the ancient Egypt artifacts that I'd put into my mood board. And so in this case, rather than doing a full sketch, what I worked on was doing iterations of like the design from that, and then eventually chose a final design that I wanted to do sketches from. What are called Titan automatons. They are making an appearance in the first issue, and basically they're an instrument that's kind of like leftover, but Pantheon uses trainee exercises. So basically they're these like massive robots that have advanced AI that are more or less the goal is to create as much destruction as they can. And so it's also the first foray into showing how brutal Pantheon is, and how even though these are trainees and it's a training exercise, it's brutal. And so like one of the things that I thought about a lot was the Danger Room in X-Men, and the Sentinels as well from X-Men, which are obviously slightly related. I actually used a lot of different things for my inspiration for these ones. I looked at like suits of armor, I looked at like deep diving suits, and then animals, as I said, and I looked up like robots that had different purposes, so like ones that were built for agility and like how that leg structure was and stuff like that, to incorporate. I don't think I like captured it super well, but that was something that I definitely looked at. And I just worked my way. For the Titan automatons, I want there to be like quite a few variations of them for, again, different reasons. So like, you know, if you have a trainee who's really speedy, you might want one that's more streamlined and geared towards that in order to take them down, versus someone who's got super strength. You might want a very strong, like, steady guard type character. So that's kind of my thought process there. So I just worked on continuing them, and the important part with this, I was getting frustrated with the robots. I felt really happy with the Eye of Ra. Like, I felt like it was coming along really well, and I liked a lot of the ideas that I had, and so I felt like I was doing a good job. And then the next thing that I worked on was the robots. And the robots, I feel like I struggled with a little bit because I wasn't sure the best way to make them like robotic and how to perfectly put on all these different things that I felt I wasn't doing particularly well, but I just kept at it. And then what I ended up with towards the end, the final sketches, I actually really liked. I didn't like the first one I did, but the rest of them I think look pretty cool, and I think I can definitely work with something there. And I think they do look like they could be oppressive. I think I probably need to think of like some other like weapons and mechanisms that they might have, but that's basically where I was at for the automatons. And then finally, the last thing I wanted to design was Ignite's supersuit. So I already have his like face design, I guess you would say. But a couple of things I wanted to experiment with was different clothing styles, something that's a little bit more like typical superhero outfit versus like maybe more military wear. And then the other thing that I wanted to make sure that I did was, when I initially designed Ignite, he didn't have a prosthetic arm, and now he does. So I wanted to work that in, but I think what I might do in a potentially a future video, or even just on my own, is I want to work on iterative design just for the arm, because I have a lot of interesting ideas there. Basically for him, he's all about control and power, and he's a very restrained hero, and his power is over fire, I guess you would say, lava, whatever. And when he was younger, he lost control of his powers, and that's how he lost his arm. And so he's all about, and he was like subsequently punished. He's all about control because of that, is one of the things. It's been beaten into him. But the people that own his arm is Pantheon. So he has kind of like, he's like indebted to them. And one of the things that I wanted to do that I thought would be cool, because Pantheon, again, is all like marble and gold, is I thought if his arm was made out of like marble and gold, it's kind of like a very oppressive reminder of who he belongs to effectively. And also it's very opulent for a prosthetic limb, right? So that was kind of one of the things I wanted to work in. The other things that I wanted to work in that were elements of his personality is that I felt, again, because of his powers, like he's likely to accidentally burn people or cause damage. And so in his like utility belt, I wanted him to have items that he could use to treat burns, for example, or to put out fires that he's potentially caused. The first one I thought was too casual. The second one I hated. And so I liked the kind of silhouette of the tank top. Not the tank top, what are those called? Like a sleeveless top. Slightly more less skin tight pants, I guess. So that's what I worked on, but I liked the boots from the second one. So I tried to incorporate that into the final design, and there's probably still some tweaking to do, but I think ultimately I'm happy with how he turned out, and I think he's a really good start, and I have like a good idea of some of the other things that I can do going into chapter 1. they were the main things that I needed to do for world building, because the rest of it's just going to be like buildings and that sort of stuff, and that's less important than some of these like props effectively, because they're going to be on the forefront and I didn't want to be designing them when I was drawing the panels effectively. So that was my thought process there. I don't think about creating the perfect thing immediately, just create a bunch of designs and work off them, work quick, work messy, and then find something that you like out of that and continue working until you're happy. And that's my advice. If you would like to continue to find out more about the journey of infinite and momentary, feel free to subscribe or like and comment on the video. Finally, you can watch the other weeks of the process. We're on week 4 right now. Thank you so much for hanging out.